Hi there. My name's Chris and I'm a high school teacher, and this is a shout out to all you teachers out there and even parents. I got a question for you. I want to describe a type of student and think about whether you've worked with this kind of student. I'm sure you have, and let's talk about what it's like to have this student and whether we feel we're successful or not. I'm talking about a student who doesn't particularly like school, doesn't necessarily do well at school, probably has struggling grades, is disengaged, probably has an IEP for some learning difficulties. They're impulsive, impatient, reactionary, and often cause trouble. How would you describe that student? What words would you use? I wonder if you would use the word gifted. It turns out those are some common markers of our gifted students in education. But, you know, if we use our assumptions about what is gifted, that's fair because we'd be correct, right? Gifted kids are students who just seem to be ahead of the rest, or they learn faster than the rest, or they already have a lot of knowledge that maybe their age mates don't have, or they have skills that are above their age mates. That's common sense, and those things are all accurate. Those are gifted students. But the first things that I mentioned, those are also gifted students. So that's the topic here about gifted students, some things to notice. So here's a question now. What if you have a student that you know is gifted? How are we going to respond to that in our classrooms?
Well, suppose you know you have a gifted kid in your class. What does that mean for you? Well, two common assumptions are, whew, that's less work for me. This kid can do stuff on their own. I can focus on my other students while this kid is just doing stuff independently. Or another idea might be, you know what, if they get done first, I'll just have them work ahead in the next unit. Or I'll just give them a bunch of extra busy work in the same area that everyone else is doing while everyone else gets caught up. These two things don't meet the mark either. So what do we do? Well, this quick video is for the purpose of helping teachers feel good and maybe a little bit more equipped and ready and maybe even excited to be working with gifted students in a way that helps every student in the room. And you'll see some important things here about identifying, understanding, and teaching gifted. If you want to assess a child to see if the child might have giftedness in some area, there are lots of assessments that are in place. They're on your screen now, and you'll see their names and their acronyms. Things like KOI, COGAT, or COGAT, or COJAT, OLSAT, NNAT, Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test, Gifted Reading Scales, things like that. Your school already has some in place. Chances are if you check your school's website, you'll see the kind of assessments that your school uses. Another thing to watch for is categories of students that tend to be under-identified. These would be recent immigrants, the economically vulnerable, and also those who may have learning, attention, or behavior issues. There are two nonprofit organizations that are great resources for this category. One is Amaze, and the other is called Teaching Tolerance. Their web addresses, as well as the titles of several books on the topic, are going to be on your screen right now. As for a teacher, when you're working with a classroom full of students and you're looking for traits to figure out, hey, might I have a kid that I think should be assessed for giftedness? I mean, it's very overwhelming, all the traits that are possible to look for. So here's some ideas of what you can look for. Don't get too overwhelmed. Some researchers say there are 5 categories of giftedness to look for. You can see those on your screen. Still others will say there are 6 categories of giftedness. So with all these different indicators to be thinking about, if you're worried that you might have a student in your room who hasn't been identified as gifted but is gifted, how about instead we just create lesson plans that are designed for gifted students, whether or not we know we have any in our room? Because here's the beauty of it. These lesson plans and these teaching styles tend to work for all students. So here's the question. Do you think that you're the kind of educator who's going to be able to modify plans and instructions in ways that work really well for gifted students? Well, let's look at that for a little bit.
As teachers of gifted students, there's a lot of traits that we have to have. Turns out though, with gifted students, those are traits that I'm sure you already have, but they become particularly influential and particularly impactful for students who are gifted. Even with these great traits in place, there can be a primary job that we have as educators of gifted students and of all students, and that is helping students become curious, engaged learners. Psychologist Carolyn Dweck informs us that students have a history. They have a history with school, with learning, with assessment, and sometimes that history is not a good one. And sometimes they've learned some unfortunate things. Maybe they've learned performance avoidance or mastery avoidance or a fixed mindset, and these stand in the way of learning. And what we as teachers of gifted and teachers of all students often need to do is help a student move out of teacher-controlled learning to student-controlled learning, as seen in this chart. This charts and other information like this on identifying and teaching gifted can be found in this resource, Differentiation for Gifted Learners by Hecox and Cash from Free Spirit Publishing. You may have seen it. You have students who think there's only two options, either perfection or they are utter failure. Some students think if they get one bad grade, then it means that they're not smart anymore. So a big goal is to get students out of that mindset and into an excitement for the variety of learning. Research has shown that differentiation is great for students, not just gifted, but all students. Differentiation in tasks and in materials and the direction and the path that you take in education. So let's talk about some ways of differentiation. I'll just talk about a few of my favorites. The beauty of choosing a model for how to do gifted education is that there are so many out there. You don't have to do all of them. Find the ones that really seem to work for you and give it a try. Here are just some of them. For a more detailed look, you could even go to this resource, Teaching Gifted Kids in Today's Classroom by Susan Weinbrenner. It's a great resource. Well, I want to tell you about a combination that I really like. I've got some notes here so that I can tell it to you. One of my favorites is compacting and also using extension activities, which are sometimes called enrichment activities or alternative activities, and using learning contracts when it comes to skills work, and using study guides for content. Well, here are those things described in a short way, but I think they're really cool. And don't forget, with all this differentiation, not only is differentiation a great approach in the classroom for instruction, but it could also be applied to assessment and to homework as well. To sum up, there is a multitude of possibilities for what we as teachers can do to energize and excite our most gifted students, and in the process, all of our students. Imagine an increase in the quantity of students who come to your room excited about learning and growing and discovering. Imagine students freeing themselves from a preoccupation with grades and instead diving passionately into deeper and more complex learning and understanding. Imagine previously disaffected and reluctant students becoming engaged. Imagine watching the love of lifelong learning taking root and growing and flourishing in your students. Imagine seeing the future of our society in your room and being really excited about what you see. I hope that this video encourages you, inspires you, and somewhat equips you to either begin, continue, or diversify your journey into offering an opportunity-rich, differentiated experience for the diversity of learners that you encounter every day. For me, I showed you lots of activities during this video, activities of things that I enjoy doing. I wonder what it would be like if in my learning I was able to use those activities to inspire me and to help me dig more deeply and use more complexity and use those activities to maybe show and display my work and my knowledge. Hopefully, you'll be able to learn as much as you can about your students in ways that can help you figure out how to reach them and how to engage them. Thank you so much for watching, and I wish you a great school year.